Now, you make the claim that consequentialism, or utilitarianism specifically, requires free will, because I think, according to you, that I'm assuming that there are people that want to avoid suffering. I really don't see how this shows a need for free will. It's not an assumption that people want to avoid suffering or seek pleasure. This is a demonstrable fact, and having desires does not require free will. Animals have desires, and yet they do not have free will. So I don't see where you're going with this. Now, next you claim that moral commands are meaningless in a deterministic universe, comparing it to shouting at a formless void. Now, saying that actions in a deterministic universe are meaningless is very much like saying the position of the football is meaningless in a game of football. Actions and events are the driving force behind determinism. They are the very essence of determinism. Our analysis tells us that giving moral suggestions can affect the behavior of those that hear those moral suggestions, especially when backed by authority. Though the very nature of psychology, especially classical conditioning, relies on this fact that our actions can and do affect the behavior of other beings. Forget Pavlovian techniques. Psychology in general is the very study of this phenomenon. Now, while the way our actions are affected by commands is determined, it is still determined by a very natural and very physical laws that are relatively consistent enough to predict and analyze. Now, you also claim that no normative views of morality are possible within determinism, and I think you were failing to see anything beyond your own point of view here. For those that don't know, normative ethics handles the ought problem, how one ought to act. Now, there is no ought by itself, no self-sufficient declaration of should in determinism. This is true, but you were forgetting that within determinism, in deterministic consequentialism, ought always has a in order to after it. For example, I would not say one ought not lie and leave it at that. I would say one ought not lie if one is to be trusted. So ought in determinism is a description of how things work within determinism. It isn't a declaration of preference, but a declaration of expectation given a certain set of data. One might say that you ought not kill, in that you ought not kill in order to avoid the negative consequences of killing for oneself and as well as the community. For killing destabilizes the community and leaves the killer open for retribution from emotional family members. See, in consequentialism, it isn't just the immediate consequences that one must consider, but the consequences down the road as well. If murder were allowed, then society would not be stable and would eventually collapse. This is where the social contract comes in, where people agree to respect the rights of others, even though it could initially benefit them to not respect them, because in the long run, others will return the favor and not take advantage of them and their own rights. Now, I was going to include arguments on reason and rationality, but Way of the Bastard already responded to me on this in a similar way that I was going to. So he took my computer analogy and modified it to a robot analogy, which I think fits even better. Now, where there are while there are a few things that I wanted to go over that he didn't, I could only go over those by rehashing everything that he said. So I'm going to just link you to his video, which Mig agrees is a well thought out response, and save what I had to say for another discussion later on down the road. I will argue, however, along with Way of the Bastard, that so far I don't see a reason why rationality requires free will beyond defining it as such. But I'd even go so far as to say that free will damages rationality. In determinism, one picks from the set of responses that one finds the most reasonable to them. So you are guaranteed to behave in as rationally a way as you are capable of at that moment. Now, it may not be rational at all, but still, it is still the best you can do at that moment in time. Now, with free will, one does not necessarily choose the most rational and can therefore pick the least rational of the choices in their mind. Under free will, someone could, despite owning a horse ranch and riding them daily, freely choose to believe that the natural world does exist, but that horses don't. Currently, we don't behave in this fashion. Our beliefs don't come by choice, but by being convinced, which follows a deterministic view and not the libertarian. So those are my thoughts on this matter. I hope that was hard-hitting enough for you, Meg. And I hope you respond to this, as well as to Way of the Bastard's response. Again, thank you for the shout-out, Tool Time. And to my viewers, I promise that at least the next 2 videos will not be on this topic. So have a nice day. Honest Discussioner, out.